take a look at the polling aggregates across those 7 key battlegrounds that we've been talking about, right? In your Sun Belt, you see a little bit more red than blue. In fact, there is no blue in the Sun Belt. But again, it's way too close to call. Trump by 3 in Arizona, 2 in Georgia, 1 in North Carolina, a tie in Nevada. Come over to those Great Lakes and a little bit more blue here, but look at this, just a point in Michigan, less than a point. When you're breaking out this symbol, Jessica, the less than, you know how close the race is. And then, of course, in Pennsylvania, all important Pennsylvania, tied, T-I-E-D. That's the bottom line of this election. Way too close to call at this point. All of the key states within a couple of points, and arguably the most important one, Pennsylvania, T-I-E-D.
Just tied. Put that in terms of the electoral map for us. How does that bear out?
Yeah, how does the electoral map bear out? Well, if the results match the polling averages, guess what? Neither candidate gets to 270 electoral votes. I don't even know what other way to put it, because Pennsylvania becomes the all-important key state. Whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the election. We've been talking about it week after week after week. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, just to the southwest of me here in New York City, becomes the all-important state. If you can figure out who wins Pennsylvania, you probably know who's going to win the election, because at this point, the polls can only tell you that both candidates are short of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. That is, of course, if the polls are actually right on the money, which they probably won't be.
Okay, explain that to us, because they're not perfect.
No, they are not perfect. So, let's go through history, right? Let's go back since 1972 and look at the key battleground states and say, how off were the polling averages? The polls aren't perfect. They are a tool. They get you in the neighborhood. But when the race is this close, when all the key battleground states are within 3 percentage points, that's within the average error band. The average error band for state polling average since 1972 is, get this, 3.4 points. 3.4 points. And then if you talk about a margin of error, right, like a 95% confidence interval, we're talking about more like plus or minus 9 points. All of the key battleground states are within this error band, and they're actually within the average error band as well. So let's kind of talk about what happens if you have an average error and apply it to the electoral map, right? Well, if we have an average error and Donald Trump benefits from the average error, guess what? He gets way past 270 electoral votes. He gets to 312. Why? He carries all the Great Lake battleground states. He carries the Southeast battleground states of North Carolina and Georgia. And he carries Nevada and Arizona out west. But of course, Jessica, there's no guarantee that the polls being off would necessarily benefit Donald Trump, even though they did both in 2016 and 2020. Because they could, in fact, the polling miss could benefit Kamala Harris like it did the Democrats back in 2022. If there was, in fact, a polling miss that benefited Kamala Harris, an average polling miss, she'd get north of 300 electoral votes. Look at that. She'd get to 319. Why? She'd carry the Great Lake battleground states, right? She'd carry Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. She'd carry the Southeast battleground states, Georgia and North Carolina. And she'd carry the Southwest battleground states of Nevada and Arizona. So the bottom line is this. The polls at this point point to a race that's way too close to call, but an average miss in either direction could turn this into an electoral college blowout. We just don't know at this point.
We just jumping off point with these blue wall states, which do probably represent the straightest path to victory for either one of these candidates. Yeah. What do you make of the state of play in those right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I coined the blue wall back in 2009, and initially it referred to the 18 states that ultimately voted Democratic in all 6 elections from 92 to 2012. The most states either party had won over 6 consecutive elections since the formation of the modern party system in 1828. Trump, of course, famously dislodged Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin from the blue wall in 2016. And now when people talk about the blue wall, they're usually referring just to those 3 states. So in my mind, it's kind of the bricks that fell out of the wall have become the wall. Now, what's really important is that since 2016, Democrats have regained the initiative in those 3 states. I think the evidence is that the counter mobilization or the backlash to Trump has been more powerful than the mobilization that Trump effectuated in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The Democrats won the governorships in all 3 in 2018. They won them again by more in 2022. They flipped 3 state legislative chambers. They hold 5 of the 6 U.S. senators. And of course, Biden won all 3 in 2020 by a combined 260,000 votes. The difference is that inflation in particular, I think, creates a tougher environment for them. But given what's happening in the national numbers, Jessica, where the erosion that Democrats are seeing relative to 2020 is primarily among non-white voters, and Harris is largely holding Biden's support among white voters, which was higher than Clinton's 4 years earlier. Clearly, I think these three states that are predominantly white and older, paradoxically, are considered the safer path for her at this point than the Sun Belt states that are younger and more diverse.
That's so interesting you bring up that point, because in talking with people, you kind of remind them that conventional wisdom that we've all held true for a long time, a lot of it in so many ways is getting turned weirdly upside down in this race if it ends up shaking out in the final result. One of them being, to your point, Harris's strength with white voters, and maybe Trump's, gaining and strength with voters of color, especially in cities, which is an interesting dynamic.
Right. I mean, race and age are kind of narrowing as divides in this election, and gender and education levels are widening in this election. And, if you kind of look at it that way, in the Sun Belt states, such a high percentage of the electorate overall, and certainly such a high percentage of the Democratic coalition are voters of color, that even small shifts away from the Democrats, particularly, what we're seeing among Latino voters, we'll have to see how much actually pans out among Black voters, but possibly some among Black men. Even small shifts can be really damaging to their ability to win those kind of states where it is generally tougher to win white voters. Historically, Democrats have run better among white voters in the former blue wall states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And as I said, they are a larger share of the electorate, 80% in Michigan, 80% in Pennsylvania, 90% in Wisconsin. So you have a scenario where it's not hard to imagine that Harris's advantage in the popular vote will erode from what Biden did in 2020. He won the popular vote by 4.5 points. Maybe she might only win the popular vote by as little as Hillary Clinton did, 2 points, or even less. But even if she does, if she's holding her support among white voters, she will be better positioned than Clinton was to still hold Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin with a narrow advantage in the popular vote. And, Pennsylvania obviously is the toughest of the three. We've been accustomed to the idea that all three of these states vote to the right of the nation overall, because they did in 2016 and 2020. But it was the opposite in the first four elections in this century. And if we have this kind of inverted pattern of racial support, it would not be surprising to me if, in fact, these states vote more Democratic than the country overall. Or something very close to the overall national level.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting to kind of watch this emerge. The other thing you mentioned the gender gap, which we've talked a lot about, but we have still not seen Nikki Haley on the trail for Donald Trump. Yeah. And she said she's waiting by the phone for his phone call, but we haven't seen her. And both campaigns, certainly the Harris campaign, has said they would love to pick up some of those Nikki Haley voters. And Trump would need them as well in some of these places. I'm thinking a lot about Pennsylvania and those collar counties. What do you make of him not bringing her out on the campaign trail? Because we're showing video right now of her with Dave McCormick, who is the Pennsylvania Senate candidate, Republican candidate in Pennsylvania.
Well, I think it's kind of indicative of, first of all, it's a real signal of how Trump views the rest of the Republican Party at this point. When he was president the first time, he felt that he had to kind of make concessions to other power centers in the party. Now he feels like he has to make no concessions to anyone, and that, the party really, that he's broken the party, and broken their will to resist him on anything. It's a mistake. There's no other way to describe it. Haley type Republican voters, probably independents who lean Republican rather than people who identify as partisan Republicans, are the most logical place for Harris to grow relative to Biden in 2020. There are a lot of parts of the electorate you look at, young men, Latino men, maybe Black men, where she's probably going to struggle to match what Biden did and may lose a few points. Where can she offset that? The most logical place are these big, racially diverse, well-educated, populous inner suburbs around Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, and Phoenix. And, the Haley voters broadly described are, I think, a very attractive target for her. It is, I think if you look at, we've talked about this before, if you look at the 2022 election results in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and also Arizona, they show you that Biden's performance in 2020 among white women with a college degree was not the ceiling for Democrats. After Dobbs, after January 6th, the Democratic gubernatorial candidates in those states did better among those women than Biden did 2 years earlier, all four of them. And Harris probably is going to have to do better among those women. Haley could help Trump, but Trump will not pick up the phone.